Okay, good to go.
I think so.
Right. Thank you, Patricia. All right, good morning, everybody.
It's not me.
Yeah. I'm going to call this meeting of the MAPC Executive Committee meeting to order. Today is February 15th, 2023. And this meeting is being conducted remotely via Zoom video conference, consistent with Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022. I often try to dispose of some of this language. We're meeting on Zoom and we're broadcasting live over YouTube for the public to be able to access these proceedings. Because we're meeting remotely, my favorite part of these agendas is calling the roll. So let me call the roll and we'll see who's here today. Imai.
Present.
Sharonda. Colette.
Present.
Kurt. Karen. Nope. Adam, I'm here. Jen.
Here.
Tom.
Here.
John.
Here.
Mo.
Here.
Shagan. I don't see him, but Diego is here.
Yep. Thanks.
Tabor.
Here.
Angie. Gina.
Here.
Steve Olenoff.
Yeah.
Courtney. I don't believe we'll have Courtney today. Vandana.
Vandana is at an MWRA board meeting today.
Okay, thank you for that. Sam.
Here.
Steve Silvera.
Here.
Juan Vega. Elaine. And Aaron.
Here.
Okay, thank you all. We have quorum. Moving on to the first item on the agenda, we have approval of the minutes from January 18th, 2023, which I believe Mark circulated in advance of the meeting. Any questions or comments or amendments in relation to the minutes? If not, I'd be open to a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
I'm going to say made by John. I didn't say who. Was it Tom? Tom, did you get that second?
I did, Tabor.
All right, perfect. Thank you. All right. Seeing no further questions in the minutes, I'll call the roll again. Imai.
Aye.
Sharonda. Colette.
Aye.
Kurt. Karen. Adam, I vote aye. Jen.
Aye.
Tom.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Mo. Sugar.
Aye. Aye.
Oh,
Sorry.
thank you. Quick note, Mark, can Diego vote?
Yes.
So Diego,
Aye.
Tabor,
Yes.
Angie, Gina.
I think I should abstain since I believe I missed this meeting.
Okay, thank you, Gina. Steve Olenoff,
Aye.
Sam,
Yes.
Steve Silvera,
Yes.
Juan, Elaine, and Aaron.
I have to abstain as well. I was not here.
Great, thank you. I also note, Patrice, for the minutes that Kurt voted via the chat yes in favor of approving the minutes. So the minutes carry. Thank you, everybody. Moving on to the third item of the agenda, we have the report of the treasurer, which is going to include an income statement for December of 2022, as well as a mid-year budget presentation for FY23. So Sam, the floor is yours.
Thank you, President Adam, and hello to everybody. Sam Seidel, Treasurer. I hope you're all doing well. Today, the Treasurer has two items to report out. One is the December income statement. I'll do that very quickly, and then we'll dig into the mid-year budget review, which is something we do every year at this time of the year, where we go back and look at the numbers we projected at the initial budget, and then see where we are and actually true up those numbers, and so to make sure that we can quote unquote land the plane come June 30th. And on that one, we're going to I'll make the presentation, and then the hope is that you will be able to report that out to the full council. But the first item on the agenda is the December 2022 income statement. And I would really, there's not much to say about this. I think the only thing that we note in this income statement is that the overhead rate is very low, which is good. This is what we predicted, is that December is a month when people are really working furiously hard to get all their work done, get it done by the end of the calendar year. And that means they're billing lots of hours. And that's what drives down the overhead rate. So that's really all that we want to report out about the December income statement, that it matched our expectations, and we were quite frankly happy to see that. So with that, I guess I would hand this back to Adam for a motion to accept the December income statement with any questions or comments or thoughts at that point.
Does anybody have any questions or comments for Sam?
The motion is actually to accept the treasurer's report. We can do the mid-year budget separately, I suppose.
Okay. I was gonna
Okay,
ask
so,
that.
all right, so
Will there be a vote necessary on the mid-year?
Maybe we could just do them together. How about that?
Why don't-
So
why
we
don't-
don't have to call the roll twice.
Save me a roll call,
One,
Sam.
yeah,
Why don't we do
right.
them?
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
At the MWRA Advisory Board, on routine motions like this and the previous, they lump them at the end of the meeting as an omnibus vote. And then if somebody takes an exception or needs to abstain, then they state that when their name is called. It saves a lot of time.
I really like that idea. I can work with Mark and the team to see if we can do that for future meetings. I think that's very, very smart use of
An awful lot of people are also using the reaction button to record their vote in that way. I don't know why we can't do that either, but
That
we'll
also,
check with council on it.
that makes a lot of sense as well.
Thank you, Mo.
You're welcome.
All right,
All
Sam.
right. All right. So hearing that, let's now jump into the mid-year budget review. And as I say, this is something we do every year. This is part of the process right at this time of the year, is to look at these numbers again, see where we're at, and then hopefully approve this to the full council after the team has had the chance to kind of go back and look over everything and true up those numbers. This year, in some ways, there's a lot going on in this mid-year budget review. And I would describe it this way. I was trying to think of sort of the easiest way to present this information. And I came up with this notion, which I'm going to now use to describe this. I will call this the blue skies, cloud, silver linings mid-year budget review. And I will now explain what I am trying to get at with that title for it. You received 3 items in your email packet. One was a budget summary. The other was a revenue budget, which is a longer 6-page document, and then also an expenditures budget. Because there's sort of a lot of working pieces, I'm going to spend most of my time on the budget summary sheet, which is really this one pager that you've received, and go through it. And I want to start with the blue skies part of it. The blue skies are that MAPC is a well-liked agency that a lot of people want to employ to do a lot of work. And that's basically a blue sky, right? How is it hard to not see the sunshine and all of that and feel the brightness of the rays? That's a good thing. And what I'd like to do to emphasize this or to demonstrate this is to bring your attention to the summary budget sheet right now to sort of explain what I mean when I say blue skies. So if you just look at the summary budget sheet, that one pager, you'll see the absolute top line number is total revenue. Below that is direct non-staff project costs. And then below that is net available for internal operations. So we're going to look at total revenue, and we're going to go all the way across to the right-hand side, and we're going to see that it's actually a negative $987,000. And you might be saying, well, Sam, that doesn't sound very blue skies. That's a down number. Why is that good news? And we go below that and we go less, direct non-staff project costs. And we see, again, a negative 1.6 million, 1.675 million. So, well, that's a negative number. And then we go below that and we see net available for internal operations, and we see 688,000. So let me just describe what's going on here. The top line that we just looked at, the 987,000, is the net total across everything. The next line below that, which is also a negative, is the pass-through money. It's money that comes from places like the federal government. It comes to MAPC and then it goes right back out the door again. And that's a negative. And the reason that's a negative is because the feds typically are a lot slower to send that money out than they think they're going to be. So they project we're going to spend this much money, MAPC, you're going to get it, and then you're going to spend it. And they see that happening. They always take longer than expected. But below that is sort of the key number, the net available for internal operations, and that's up by well over $500,000. And that's the money that the agency has to use to hire staff and get projects done and work on the regional planning issues that face everybody. And that number, just to reemphasize that, is $688,000 more dollars than we anticipated 6 months ago. 6 months ago, we were doing pretty well. We thought we had a pretty healthy budget. In the intervening 6 months, we are now increasing that number by even more. So that's blue skies. If that's blue skies, then what's the cloud? And the cloud is when you have all this work, you need the staff to do the work. And one of the issues that this agency has been grappling with for quite some time is just the ability to have enough staff to deploy to actually get this work done, to book the work, count the income, and put it into the spent money. So that's the cloud that we're addressing. And I want to say that my review, and I should state right up front that the Finance Committee met twice on January 30th and February 8th. We got to hear the whole presentation by the team and the staff. And the report from the treasurer is that the team is very aware of this. They're not avoiding it, and they are working very hard on it. And I want to share with you some of the things that they shared with us about what they are doing to address this cloud issue that we just don't have enough staff. And so I'm going to walk through those steps right now. Oftentimes, I'll just take a little parenthetical pause here to say that oftentimes I will take pauses in the middle to take questions. What I'm really going to try and do is just get through all of this, and then we can sort of have any questions, comments at that point. So here's some of the things they laid out that they're working on. And when I say the team, I mean Mark, who has been around for a bunch of budgets, but Anna, who is the finance director, who this is her first mid-year budget, and also Lizzie and Catherine, and this is their first mid-year budget in their roles. And so I want to say they've worked incredibly hard on this, and we appreciate all their hard work. Number one, I'm gonna put this in my order, just to hire more staff, just to bring on more staff. And there are currently 6 positions that are posted. There are 7 more positions that are under consideration, under review for posting. So that is a way you can get through more of this work, bring more staff on. Another thing that the team did was to go back to their directors and ask them to sharpen their pencils. And as Mark pointed out when he made the presentation, that is a metaphor that almost has no meaning anymore, because when's the last time you actually picked up a pencil to do anything? But the point there was to say to everybody, truly, honestly, not on your best day wish list, but in actual fact, how much work do you think you're really going to be able to get done by June 30th? And that process will give us a more realistic number that we can put into the budget at this point for our mid-year budget review. And the directors did that. A lot of hard work went into that, and they came back with their numbers. And they were able to say, well, we think we'll get this much work done, but not this much work done. And that actually has been very helpful. A third thing that the team did was they adjusted. Now we're really sort of getting into the weeds of budgeting, but I just want to share all this because it is a lot of information. I just want to share it all. Was to adjust the direct billing rate. And the direct billing rate basically is the assumptions we make about how much time an employee can bill to a project, say over 100 hours of actual work time. And the assumption was, well, they can bill 74%. They can bill 74 of those hours to that. But when we went back to actually review those numbers, that number is more accurately at 71.5. It's actually a little bit lower. It's a little bit less than what we assumed they'd be able to bill. So that new number has been factored into this budget. Instead of 74%, they've bumped that down to 71.5%. That gives us an accurate number, but it's also going to have some implications on the overhead rate, and we'll see that shortly. So as we march on, a lot of information here, I know. What are some of the implications of these changes, of these actions that the team, what I'm calling the team, is doing? I want to make sure I don't lose my pages here. On the direct billing rate adjustment, the reduction from 74 hours out of 100 down to 71.5 hours out of 100, that is more accurate, but it does mean that those hours that aren't billed directly to the client, if you will become administrative hours. They'll become admin hours, and that's going to impact our overhead rate. And at this point, I want to direct you back to the summary budget sheet, because on this sheet, you'll see right about 2/3 of the way down the page, you'll see the overhead rate. And that overhead rate, as you look from column 1 to column 2, is going up from 118% to 121%. Basically, at the beginning of the year, we thought we'd be able to get all our work done with an overhead rate of 118%. Now we are re-estimating that and saying, no, actually, that new number really should be 121%. What's interesting about that change is that we actually have to get approval from MassDOT for that new number. And as I understand it, all our paperwork has been filed with MassDOT. They are now reviewing it, and they will get back to us at some point about that new number. But it is a change, and we will have to look at that. And the last implication I want to sort of pull out of all of this is that when they went back to their directors and said, quote unquote, sharpen your pencils, look really hard with a keen eye about how much you really think you're going to get done, and give us that new number, that's where our silver lining comes in, because they came back with their actual numbers, and it turns out that they think, really, truly, honestly, we probably can't get through all the work we projected we thought we could get through. So we're going to push some of that money out to future years, to the next fiscal year, FY24, and perhaps beyond. And now I'm going to direct you back to the summary budget sheet, where right above the overhead rate is a line that says excess revenue to be realized in FY24. And that number, as you go from column 1 to column 2, goes from 0 in the initial budget to $376,000. And the point there is only to say that silver lining means that we're going to start the next fiscal year with some quote unquote money in the bank, with some projects already teed up, already ready to go. So it means that the next fiscal year will start off strong. Now I'm going to take a brief pause. We are just going to keep moving through all of this stuff because there's a lot here to cover. But that's really the 30,000 foot view. And I just wanted to make you aware of all that. I do see a hand up from Steve Olenoff. So Steve, do you want to?
Yeah, so why do you need an approval from MassDOT?
That's to Mark.
Yeah, MassDOT is our federal cognizant agency as designated by the Federal Highway Administration. That means that they are responsible, and always have been, responsible for determining our overhead rate. We do have one federal grant where it's decided by another agency, but that's a very small part of our finances. 98%, I'd say, of our finances are dependent upon a MassDOT approved overhead rate. And that's always been the system, and that's the way we do it.
All right, so moving along here, we're now going to move on to the expenditure sheet, which is this single sheet here that says expenditure budget at the top of it. And I just want to point out a couple of things in this sheet as we go through all this. The first is that top section of the expenditure sheet, which is titled personnel. That number is up clearly that's up by $384,000. That includes, and these are indirect costs. So that is partly because of this adjustment in how much we think people can bill directly to clients. We've knocked that number down. We think there's less that they can bill directly to clients, which means there'll be more indirect costs on those hours. But also it is at that number because some personnel came on board sooner than was anticipated in the original budget. They were able to join the team. And they also came in at higher salaries. As we all know, the labor market is pretty tight. And in certain roles, these people are very valuable. And to bring them onto your team, instead of bringing them perhaps in the middle of the salary range, you end up at the higher end of the salary range. So that really explains where that number comes from. And then below that, I'm really not going to go into a whole lot of the expenditure numbers. I'll just point out a couple of things that are sort of interesting to me. As you go down in sections, there's a travel section. You'll see right below that is transit passes. That's up by $40,000. That has to do with the fact that we're now meeting in person. People are coming into the office more. More meetings are no longer on Zoom. They're actually going to happen in real life, if you will. That explains that number. And then I'm going to skip down to other expenses, which is down at the bottom of the sheet, and just pull out the strategic plan DEI assessment consultant. That number is knocked down by $55,000. And as I understand it, and the team here can explain it better, they put out the RFP. They didn't really find what they were looking for exactly. So they're going to go back and do that again. But for this year's budget, that number is going to come down. And I put that in there just as an interesting sort of factoid of what's going on at the agency. When you net all that out, you go down to the very bottom of the page, you see that we're up by $253,832. And that's really explained mostly in the personnel side, the issues of people coming on board sooner, the higher salaries, and this adjustment in the rate. The other piece that we also received was the 6-page budget sheet. And I'm actually typically when I do this, I go through this in greater detail and sort of point stuff out. I'm not going to do that this time, actually. There's just so much in there. Basically, what happens in the mid-year is we true up those numbers. We make them more accurate to what's really going on. I will just point out as an example of where I started in this description, the kinds of projects that are coming online that were not anticipated at the beginning of the year. The Good Jobs Challenge, it's $700,000. That's additional, that's new from the beginning of the year that was not foreseen. The DLTA augmentation at $370,000. That's well over $1 million that was not foreseen 6 months ago. Those are some of the challenges that the agency is facing. Is people want us, they want us to work for them, but we got to get the staff on board and we got to figure out exactly how we're going to do that. My final takeaway is that the team is very well aware of all these issues. They are working very hard on these issues. And the Finance Committee had the chance to meet and voted this mid-year budget review out on February 8th with a favorable recommendation to the Executive Committee. And the hope today is that we, the Executive Committee, can then forward this on to the full council. That concludes the mid-year budget review from the Treasurer. And I will hand it, accept any questions, comments, thoughts, and I will hand it back to Adam on however we're going to manage this in terms of a vote.
Great. Thank you so much, Sam.
Yes.
Before we ask for a motion, are there any further questions for Sam or the team at MAPC? All right, looks like, oh, Colette, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have kind of one question. Do we anticipate a lot of pushback at Mass DOT for the change in the overhead rate is the kind of overriding question. And then underneath that is the change in the overhead rate, which is really driven by the billing change. I have to say I used to work in a billing environment. I still have nightmares about billing. Is it because we feel we can't push the cost to the client, or that there's more administrative work to be done, and that's why you're reducing it from 74 to 71?
Both good questions. Do you want me to try that, Sam?
Please, yes, Mark, go.
Okay,
go ahead.
and I will ask Anna to back me up if necessary. We have done some inquiries, Colette, to MassDOT, and my expectation is that it will be approved. It's a small change. We are considerably below the rate for many of our sister RPAs from other parts of the state, and it doesn't actually cost MassDOT any money. It's an internal reallocation and a fairly modest one. It is the only time in the 20 years that I've been here that we needed to ask for change in the overhead rate in the middle of the year. And I think that is because of sort of many of the extraordinary market circumstances that we're facing at the moment, which honestly I could spend a half hour on, but won't. In regard to the second question, from the perspective of a client, it's a relatively small change. One thing that we have seen that affects it and causes it is, although there is inflation in wages generally, they are greatest in the areas of administering the agency. Particularly, I might note, in the finance field, where it is extraordinarily difficult to hire at the moment, as I'm sure you know. And the salaries that people command are simply higher. And it is simply not the case that planner wages and policy analyst wages have gone up as quick as wages in the administrative areas. And we just have to, we are a larger agency. We require more of those indirect staff. They perform real functions that are important to the agency's well-being. And we can't really do without them. So, and don't want to. So that is a bit of an internal reallocation that has occurred. These changes, both on the planning and policy side and on the indirect side, do mean that the budget for a typical project is going up. And that's one of the struggles we have. It would be nice if every one of these increased dollars resulted in a dollar's worth of additional work for our members, but I can't honestly say that that's always true, because the cost of a typical project is not $30,000 anymore. It might be $50,000 or $60,000 now. And that is a long-term change, not only in the last year or two, not only in COVID, but during the COVID pandemic, but going back a number of years.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, seeing no other questions, I believe what I would do is entertain a motion to accept the income statement for December 2022 and approve the mid-year budget presentation as presented by Sam for FY23. Do I have that right, Sam?
And it would actually be, if possible, to recommend
okay,
the approval of the mid-year budget to the full council.
So move.
Second.
So I saw a motion by Mo. Was that Aaron who seconded it? Great. Hey, I got it. All right. Seeing no further questions, I will call the roll. Imai.
Aye.
Sharonda. Colette.
Aye.
Kurt.
Aye.
Karen. Adam. I vote aye. Jen.
Aye.
Tom.
Aye.
John. Mo.
Aye.
Diego.
Aye.
Tabor. Oh, we had Tabor. Oh,
Aye.
Tabor's voting yes. Angie. Gina.
Aye.
Steve Olenoff. Steve, do we have it? Steve Olenoff? Nope. I'll come back in a second, Steve. Sam.
Aye.
Oh, thank you, Steve. Sam.
Aye.
Steve Silvera.
Aye.
Juan. We have Juan. Elaine. And Aaron.
Aye.
Great. Motion carries. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Mark. Thank you to the whole team. It's as Aaron has mentioned in the chat, it's a lot of work and dedication and expertise to put this all together. So thank you for presenting it. And again, thank you to the team for all the work they do to help get us ready and help Sam make that excellent presentation. So moving on to the next agenda item, we have a report of the executive director. So Mark, I will turn it to you.
Sure. Adam, would you mind if I raised an issue of other business prior to the executive director's report because I feel it goes a little better with the mid-year budget review.
I think, yep, go for it.
Is that okay? All right.
Of course, yes.
So I apologize for raising this as a matter of other business and not including it on the agenda. And I also apologize to Adam, who I intended to call this morning and discuss this with. But then I raced out to an eye doctor's appointment and left my phone at home. So I had no ability to call him. And it relates to the municipal assessment for FY24. As Sam indicated, several of the folks, most particularly Anna, is new to this process, and Anna's been quiet, but she is in the meeting. Are a little new to this process, and a few days ago, Lizzie actually pointed out to me that there are a few regular approvals that we require of the council, and we hadn't. No instructions had been left for us by the previous finance team as to when we usually take those up. And those two items are the approval of the routine 2.5% increase in municipal assessment, which it turns out in reviewing previous agendas, we usually do at the winter council meeting. And then the annual approval of the right to borrowing authority, which we usually do. I see Erin shaking her head because she remembers all of this, which we usually do at the annual meeting in May. And we are honestly caught a little bit short on this, but I think need to address it. And the reason is because the 2.5% increase in the assessment is usually baked into the budget that we will present at the annual meeting for fiscal 24, not the mid-year budget, but next year's budget. And because of the schedule of our council meetings, the approval of the mid-year budget usually comes a little bit late, but the approval of our annual budget must come before July 1st. And so we do that at the end of May when the council has its annual meeting. And it's a little risky to go into that meeting at the end of May with a budget that assumes a 2.5% increase in assessment and have that same day do the vote on the assessment. So we usually do that at the winter council meeting. And I apologize for the fact that we haven't had the few weeks run up to this that we normally do. Anna is now in the process of working with the Department of Revenue to finalize the list of assessment dollars from each municipality. The overall increase, the increase to which we are limited by law, obviously under Prop 2.5, is 2.5%. That requires the annual assent of the council, which we've always been able to achieve. There have only been 2 times in my 20 years in MAPC that we have not requested that. Once was after we got a statutory resetting of the assessment, and we did not feel it was appropriate to go back to municipalities for an additional increase over that. And then the other time was right at the beginning of the pandemic, when nobody knew what was happening, and we didn't think it was appropriate at that moment in time to seek the increase. So we will get the usual list of communities adjusted by 2.5% and also adjusted by population. So unfortunately, it's not quite as simple as simply upping everybody by 2.5% because it's a per capita charge. So they also adjust for some communities that saw population growth or some communities that saw population decline. And if there's growth everywhere, well, then it's just 2.5% for everyone, basically. We hope to have that by the 2nd of March, but I would like to ask the executive committee to do what it has always done, which is to support that adjustment. The lion's share of those resources goes into our technical assistance programs to individual cities and towns where we are obviously always way oversubscribed for work. And we always like to be able to meet, those needs as best we can. So my hope is that the executive committee would approve that this year at this meeting with the knowledge that the detail will be forthcoming before the council meeting. And I'm glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mark. Could you, I don't want to put you on the spot, given that the figures aren't calculated, but for the newer members, of the executive committee, could you give a sense of the orders of magnitude of either the total increase that 2.5% represents, and that might help people understand what they're talking about for their own community that they're representing.
So it's around a $2 million total.
Okay.
I believe. Anna, if you know exactly what the number is, or approximately what the assessment number is for FY23, that would be helpful. Do you have that one?
Yes, it's a 1,900,000 plus, you know, it's like in the low
Good.
1,900,000.
I wasn't too far off.
Yeah, you were pretty close. Yeah. Like
So
1,913,000.
At $2 million, it's a 2.5% increase on that amount, which I believe is, if I'm correct, $50,000 or so, around that.
So we're talking about orders of magnitude for communities ranging in size from some 10,000 to 40,000, less than 1,000.
You know, Boston and Cambridge pay large assessments.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty steep drop after that. Everybody pays based on population. So some of our smaller towns may pay, you know, $12,000, $15,000, $18,000. The city of Boston pays about $250,000.
And I don't mean to monopolize questions, Mark, but I mean, this is not a will of the committee type vote. This is a very procedural matter.
Well, it's a little more than procedural. It is recommending to the council that the usual 2.5% increase be approved. It is a decision of the council. You need a majority vote at the council. And we've never had difficulty getting that, but you know,
yeah,
it's an important process to go through.
All right. I mean, I'm comfortable entertaining a motion, but I would, you know, at your discretion, recommend talking to council to make sure that the vote is valid.
Mark, isn't this typically done by the treasurer's report? Or at least in the past, I know I'd asked for it myself during the presentation. I don't recall if did we change that last year?
Well, none of this was changed intentionally, Tabor. As I indicated at the outset, this was, you know, we kind of tripped on this, to be perfectly honest. Thankfully, Lizzie didn't, and she raised it. And I said, yeah, gee, we need to check into that. I'm not really sure if it's winter or annual, so March or May. We could have waited till May, but I just think that's a little risky, because then we do the annual budget and the increase in assessment on exactly the same day. In fact, historically, we have done it at the winter council meeting, and that's why I'm proposing that we should do that today. Normally, yes, you're absolutely right. This would have come as part of the treasurer's report. But it is the same request, let's put it that way. And if you would feel more comfortable getting Sam's position on this, I think we could ask him.
No, I just recall it having to do it myself, so I thought that was part of it. That's all.
No, Tabor, I'm going to concur with you. I certainly remember having this be part of what the treasurer reports out on. So I suppose I could make the motion then. Why unless there's further discussion on this matter, I will make the motion as the treasurer. What is the actual formulation of the motion?
Please recommend to the council the approval of the annual 2.5% increase in assessment.
So moved.
I'll second that.
All right, so motion made by Sam. I'll give the second to Steve Olenoff. Is there any further discussion or questions on this motion? All right, seeing none, I'll call the roll. Imai?
Aye.
Sharonda?
Aye.
Colette?
Aye.
Kurt?
Aye.
Adam, I vote aye. Jen?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
John? Mo?
Aye.
Diego?
Aye.
Tabor?
Aye.
Gina?
Aye.
Steve Olenoff?
Aye.
Sam?
Aye.
Steve Silvera?
Aye.
And Aaron? All right,
Aye.
thank you, Aaron. Motion passes.
And responding to Imai's point in the chat, does anyone want to make a motion that it be altered to be based on median income? Would that be?
I don't know, with Wellesley and Weston both having votes, we might have trouble.
It might be some
It-
objections around.
It would be
around the
equitable,
table
but
here.
they would be mad at me.
It truly would be equitable, and maybe at some point we ought to be thinking about that seriously. It's not off the wall.
Well, let's not dive deeper into an item not on the agenda.
No.
So, why don't we move into the executive director's report, and I'll note that we're about halfway through the allotted meeting time and not really halfway through the meat of the agenda for all those yet to present.
And I'm gonna try and be quick about this. You have the executive director's report. If you wish to open it, I'm going to start at the end because our departments are frequently listed in alphabetical order. It seems that Eric Barassa and his transportation team are always at the end. And the transportation report is so impressive this time that I wanted to start out with it. Right at the front is the $2.2 million Safe Streets and Roads for All grant, which we just received. On behalf of the Boston MPO, Eric is going to present on that a little later in this meeting, so I won't steal his thunder, but that is an enormous accomplishment, and we expect to do great things with it along with our colleagues at CTPS. Great advances in the effort to generate a statewide trail map. Believe it or not, trails do not tend to end at the boundaries of regional planning agencies. And what a radical idea that there should be a statewide trail map which uses the same data and which is available and presented by all of the regional planning agencies. Thanks to DCR for initial support of that effort. And we now have an application into them for additional ongoing support of that work. Our data services team and our transportation team working very hard on that. We finished our West Metro perfect fit parking study. As you know, we've done some of these in Boston and north of the city. We've now done one west of the city. There'd be very similar results showing that parking in multifamily housing was routinely underutilized, vastly underutilized at the times when our staff goes out to check with their orange jackets, which is generally in the middle of a weekday, in the middle of the night on a weekday, like at 2 in the morning, in either the spring or the fall, which are the best time to count cars. And we are hoping that all of that information will be taken into account in maybe trimming back the parking requirements, very expensive parking requirements in some of the multifamily developments in that part of the region. I'm glad to say we're working on an evaluation of the free transit pass pilot program in the city of Somerville. I don't know if Sarah's here today, but that's a very important pilot and a very important evaluation. And lastly, I want to draw your attention to the new report that Allison Felix and Travis Pollock have recently come up with called From App to Table, Rapid Food Deliveries in Massachusetts and their impact on traffic, transportation, and the use of the curb. Truly great work in an area where there has been very limited data collected so far and policy recommendations flowing therefrom. So big kudos to the Transportation Department for a tremendous amount of great work in this past 3 months. A few other things I'd like to point out, going back up into alphabetical order under clean energy. The Winter Energy Price Spike Communications Toolkit is a very important toolkit for our cities, towns, community-based organizations, and others attempting to deal with the impact of rising energy prices, particularly in environmental justice communities, and very salient given the fact that later in this week, I think temperatures are supposed to fall once again. Thanks to Sasha Scheideroff and the rest of the clean energy team for a lot of great work on that. The thing I want to note about communications is just something about the communications department, not any one of the particular great things they've been working on, but after a lot of turnover, Amanda Linehan's team is now fully staffed and entirely located on the 6th floor and doing some great work, a number of which items are indicated in the executive director's report. Data services, a big accomplishment in the last 3 months was the release of our 4-year regular population, employment, and housing projections. There are links to all of that, opportunities to comment. Once we get comments from the municipalities in our region and from the regional planning agencies in other parts of the state, we'll be finalizing those projections, which the MPO uses for its long-range transportation plan, and which are also used for many other state activities. I'm moving down under environment to note that the 13 grants of this year's Accelerating Climate Resilience Program, which is run by Van Du in our environment department, have been announced and released. $835,000 to fund climate resilience and adaptation work by municipal applicants, entirely funded by the Barr Foundation. I think this is the third program release that we have done, and big kudos to Van, to her colleagues in the clean energy team, and to Martin Pillsbury and Julie Curdy, and to Catherine Antos for finalizing the release of those very much sought after monies by our cities and towns. I don't often mention our MAPC letters, but I'm going to mention one here today, which is on, I think I see the pages did not come out on this draft. I apologize for that, but it's in the environment section. I'm toward the end. Encore Boston Harbor, notice of project change. This is a major expansion of the facilities at the casino in Everett, a very serious and important and impactful project. And I'm pleased to say the Secretary of EEA went along with most of MAPC's recommendations for ongoing review and mitigation in regard to that project. Big thanks, as always, to Allison Felix on our transportation team, who leads the effort for developing those letters. I might note in the government affairs section that I and Matt Walsh in government affairs and Rep. Paul Donato from Medford met with Chair Aaron Michaelowitz to discuss the DLTA program and our search with our sister RPAs for an increase in that program after several years of level funding. It was a very positive meeting. Can't tell for sure how it will come out, but I think we were really able to answer many of the chairman's valuable questions. He was very intentional, very engaged. It was a really good conversation. He was taking notes throughout, and I do feel good about it. Governor Healy and Lieutenant Governor Driscoll have filed two important bills, which Leah and her team describe in this section of the report, one in regard to economic development and the other in regard to Chapter 90. You can read the details in the government affairs section of the report. Both in the housing part of land use and in the data services report, we talk a lot about the work that we're doing on 3A. We're working now with about 8 individual communities on their multifamily compliance zoning plans. Those communities are listed. We have also been contracted with by MHP and DHCD to do some special work with the cohort of 12 rapid transit communities who are the ones that are going to have to comply by December of 2023, this year. And they are also some of the communities where the most complex zoning issues occur. They are also some of the communities where their current zoning is closest to compliant, but in most cases not fully compliant. So we're doing that work. A letter has been finalized between MAPC and CHAPA on the issue of affordable housing in those districts. And people should stay tuned for more discussion about that issue as well. So I just want to note that the agency is really very heavily focused on helping our communities to comply and making sure that the guidelines are faithfully implemented and are productive from a housing perspective, but also can be accomplished by our cities and towns. I would draw your attention also in the housing section of the land use department to the recent meeting of the Metro Mayors Coalition Regional Housing Task Force, and particularly a paragraph describing how many units have been produced toward the Metro Mayor's goal over the course of the past 3 years. A big thank you to Jesse Partridge in our data services team for working very hard on that document. A lot of interesting information there. and a paragraph summarizing it in the report here. I would say if I were asked where are we, I would say we're at about 60% of goal in the last 3 years. That's not great. It's also not terrible, given that we came through a pandemic during that period of time, which could not have been predicted when the goal was set. But if we need any more of a reason to understand why it's necessary to do the MBTA compliance zoning, then that report is an indication. We are still way behind in terms of producing housing throughout the region and, in fact, throughout the state. A couple of quick items on municipal collaboration. I would draw your attention to the emergency preparedness practice. A lot of good work going on there. That's still relatively new work for the agency, and it's gone so well, and we have so many contracts coming in now that I think we are going to hire an emergency preparedness specialist to work with Beth and Dan, who are currently on that team. They staff our Health and Medical Coordinating Coalition. The Metro Mayor's Shannon Grant has once again gotten another award, this time of $750,000. A lot of the work there is not simply on some of our most traditional work of youth violence and gang activity, but very much related to improved relations and understanding between law enforcement, prevention partners, the communities, and young people. And there is certainly an enormous amount of work to be done in that arena. Cybersecurity is another area where there's an enormous amount of work to do, which is why I want to congratulate and thank the municipal collaboration team for being involved in the 2022 nationwide cybersecurity review, which is also described there. I think my last 2 points are under strategic initiatives, and the question of the strategic plan and DEI assessment were mentioned. Yes, indeed. We did not find the result we were looking for by putting out an RFP for both of those together. So we are now putting them out separately. The DEI assessment RFP is out and on the street, and we are expecting to make that selection either sometime in March or very early April. The strategic plan RFP will go out in March, and we'll probably make that decision either in late April or early May, would be my expectation. We are spending just as much money on these efforts, but the reason it doesn't hit the budget quite as hard is because some of that money is moved into fiscal 24. You can also see that with Eric Hove, Lizzie Wyant, and Catherine Entos, we made some distributions through what's called the Executive Discretionary Fund to help staff do new research on areas of practice that might be added to MAPC's portfolio. 13 proposals, just like the ACR, were approved. These are usually pretty small proposals. It averages about $7,000 per, but the large number of proposals we get is an indication that our staff is very highly focused on innovation and figuring out what the next work would be. Community engagement, big changes in terms of direction. We're looking for a new director. Christian Brandt, as you know, has stepped in as interim community engagement director. Sasha Perotti has become our new sub-regional program manager. And I will close out under public health by noting that actual work is underway establishing the health center at the Randolph High School as part of the Randolph Community Wellness Program, a long-standing effort on the part of the public health team at MAPC, with the funding acquired and the tremendous support of Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. Adam, I think that's about enough.
Thank you, Mark. I see Buzz has a question for you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's enough. Boy, what an incredible layout of what's going on. And note that you raised the MIPA reviews, which we don't often raise here, as you noted. I wanted to bring to your attention and wonder whether you've had thoughts about it. The towns of Bedford and I think Lexington and Concord and Lincoln are very upset about the Hanscom ENF, for which Martin and you gave a C. It is a proposal that will bring, a Boeing, 757s into Hanscom. It has 500,000 gallons of jet fuel increasing. It has 500,000 square feet. All of the active work is in Bedford, but I believe both Bedford and Concord and Lincoln And at least 2 state senators and a couple of representatives have all weighed in deep concern, if not opposition, to the project. I wonder if there's a mechanism for suggesting you relook at a C
The
designation.
mechanism would be, I'm going to ask Catherine if she would have a conversation with Martin and Allison. And let's see if, in fact, we want to change the C to a B.
Okay, and then maybe just connect with the town managers and the.
Well, of
your
course,
MAPC
we would
reps.
do that anyway.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Buzz. Thank you, Mark. Any other questions for Mark? Okay. Seeing none, there's no vote necessary on the executive director's report. So why don't we move to a report of the legislative committee? And I'll turn to you first, Keith.
Thanks very much, Adam. Keith Bergman, Chair of the Legislative Committee. We met last Wednesday. We have no fresh votes to have the Executive Committee take. So I would just refer us next to Leah Robbins from our Government Affairs team. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Keith.
Awesome. Thanks, Keith. I am really excited to talk to you guys today because there's a lot happening. Like my phone is kind of blowing up at the moment because, as you may have heard, the legislature this week is assigning committees, and the Senate has just announced their committee appointments. So there will be lots of things to celebrate and to dig into to see who we're going to be working with on so many of the priority areas that we approved in December. So I'm really excited for that. And I think the House is going to maybe be making their announcements tomorrow. So that's kind of exciting and very late breaking. What I want to do today is talk through 3 different areas. So one is to talk about legislation the governor has filed, which Mark highlighted briefly and is included in your executive director's report. Another is to talk about some things that are happening in the legislature and to talk about some asks we're hoping that you can help us with in the coming weeks. So the governor has filed 3 major bills that we want to bring to your attention. So one is at the end of January, her administration filed a supplemental budget and of $282 million. And one of the pieces that we've been following very closely is the inclusion of $44 million for emergency shelters, and including funding to extend some supports for our most vulnerable students. And that would be through $65 million of extending school breakfast because the federal dollars are going away for that program. And similarly, $40 million for schools to support homeless youth and family. So federal dollars are disappearing. So we're looking to continue those supports through the end of this current school year. There's also $130 million included in that proposal for SNAP, which is highly subscribed to at the moment as a program. So that's a supplemental bill that is currently in the House Ways and Means Committee for their consideration. We're waiting for them to take that up, hopefully in the very, very near future, because the administration, as you might have seen, is saying that they're really concerned about funding for the shelter beds. And we've been hearing it from our cities and towns as well. The governor has also filed 2 bonding bills. So one is the Chapter 90 proposal that's $400 million over 2 years. So level funding, but consistency. We've been asking for the past couple of years to increase that dollar amount. And we'll continue to be doing that in line with a number of other organizations as well. And then she also filed what she's called an immediate needs bond bill that would include funding for MassWorks, housing creation and preservation, shelters. What it doesn't include, which we were disappointed to see, was downtown revitalization funding. That's something MAPC has been urging since the first ARPA tranches were allocated under the past administration. That's something we have heard loud and clear around this table as a priority. So we'll be continuing to lift that up as an area that we're hoping the House will be able to add in. The Chapter 90 bills before the Transportation Committee, and that immediate needs bond is also before the House Ways and Means Committee. The House Ways and Means Committee is about to get really busy because not only do they have those two bills under their consideration, they're soon to be taking up the budget process. So just as like a reminder of where we are in the fiscal year calendar, the governor is going to be releasing her first budget on March 1st. Mark your calendars. It's going to be a big day. And then that will kick off oversight hearings in the House and Senate Ways and Means Committee, where they will hear from her secretaries about why they need those funds. I highly recommend listening in on those if you are interested in a particular agency. It's a real chance to hear what they're looking to be doing in the next fiscal year. And it's something we will be watching very closely and working to ask some good questions as we're able to. And then the House will be taking up the budget at the end of April, right after school vacation week. So we are deep in the throes of advocacy for our top line items of district local technical assistance, as Mark mentioned, and the Shannon grant, along with a number of other priorities that we're coordinating with our legislative committee to sort of build out that list. So that is very deep underway in the legislature. So what I think I would like to ask for you is your help in talking, when you see legislators out and about, your help in asking for three things. So one is that they co-sponsor the MAPC endorsed legislation that you guys took a vote on in December. And that's all on our website, and I can drop a link to that in the chat. And it would be really helpful to continue to lift that up. We're going to be doing, you'll see an email blast from MAPC in the next few weeks, maybe even later this week, with template language that you can use to ask legislators to support the many bills. Of those, I want to particularly draw attention to a bill that would address the hybrid meeting deadline that is fast approaching on March 31st. You might have seen there was a bit of a Twitter storm yesterday about it, really with municipal officials chiming in with concern about that fast approaching deadline. We think that there is need to keep the ability for meetings to be hybrid for a whole host of reasons. But we need your help in making sure legislators address that early, because it's, it's about a month away. And that's a really quick timeline for legislators to move a bill through the whole process. Not unheard of, but I think it's going to take all of us acting together. So we'll be sending around template language for outreach on that as well. And then the third thing is DLTA and Shannon, and especially DLTA, because we're seeking pretty big increase in the program this year because we've seen such significant requests from communities. So we'll be asking for your help to just mention to legislators that we are seeking that increase on DLTA and need your help for it to be their ask to Ways and Means. Legislators all have every legislator has a meeting with the Ways and Means chair in their branch, and they get to go in with a couple asks, usually like 3 to 5. And our goal this year is to have more legislators put DLTA on that short list. And the only way we're going to be able to get that is if they hear from their community members that it's a priority. So now is the perfect time to be making those asks. Again, we'll send around some template language, and you'll be seeing email blasts out from MAPC urging everyone on our list to take these steps. And we wanted to make sure to give you all an early heads up that those are coming down the line. Those were my 3 big areas I wanted to cover. And I see there are some hands up. So I will open for any questions.
So I think we have Erin first and then Imai.
Great, thank you, Leah. I know that you mentioned about the hybrid meeting, remote meeting extension. My question is, when are we going to have when is the conversation going to switch from an extension to a legislative change? Why do we keep, we're all agreeing that this is good, right? And, we're band-aiding it, and then we're running up against a deadline now in a month that it expires. So I guess, I guess I'm just having trouble understanding where the trepidation is or where the hesitation is to make a larger legislative.
Yeah, we are meeting with legislators, and I think my video froze, so hoping you can still hear me. We are meeting with legislators to try to understand what that trepidation is. One second. Okay.
Leah, do you want me to
Great. So-
jump in?
We're trying to understand what the trepidation is from legislators. And we are pushing and saying very loudly that we need a permanent change. That's the bill that we worked on with Senator Goby and Representative Driscoll. And I think importantly, the bill that we worked on that this committee approved not only it would be a permanent change for all of the existing provisions, but would also enable municipalities with open town meeting forms of government in the future to also have hybrid, right? Because right now that's not addressed at all. So we're saying we need to have this change permanently on the books. There is a bill that was filed that would be another extension filed by Senator Brownsberger. It would extend the current provisions until the very end of this current legislative session. I'll be honest, the dates there kind of fill me with a little bit of terror, just in terms of how they would address that based on other competing legislative priorities that happen at the end of session. So I think it's hard to know why legislators are not pushing for the formal change. My gut is that we are unfortunately probably going to get another temporary extension just because the bill hasn't had a full hearing, but maybe they will push a full hearing and really hear robustly from communities, and we could get it early. I don't know. I'm with you.
I'll be a little
I'm not
more,
holding my breath.
I'll just be a little more blunt and less polite than Leah
Yeah.
is. There are plenty of people in local government and plenty of people in state government who do not want more people participating in government. And they won't say so, but we have mayors that have completely shut off hybrid meetings. None, zero. You come in person, that's it. The pandemic's over. And people won't say it, but I think that's what's going on. Not everybody likes this technology. And MAPC's perspective has been very forceful on this. We do not want to force every community to make every meeting hybrid because there are some cost implications to that, but we would like the option to be available for all local meetings, including even finding a way to do it for open town meeting, which is hard, but we've done it. And we would also like the state to provide some funding, particularly to more needy communities, in order to be able to facilitate it. Because clearly, more members of the public participate in government under this system.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Leah. Imai.
Oh, thank you for that, Mark. I wholly agree that, more people participate in government, and I'm glad you guys are pursuing that. But that wasn't my question. I want to ask Leah if, since you mentioned MassWorks and the governor, putting in some funds, I think you said emergency or temporary funds for MassWorks. Do you see any more or bigger chunks of funding going to things like MassWorks to kind of make the carrot for 3A and conforming with that bigger for communities to give them a bigger incentive, or maybe even moving some of the things that I don't know what they would be, but that were funded through other mechanisms into MassWorks so that municipalities are more likely to comply?
Oh man, I'm not sure if that's a strategy they're pursuing. My sense has been that this $400 million ask is just a true up for the existing kinds of allocations that they've been doing under MassWorks. I don't think it's anything exceptional beyond what they have been spending, that they've just sort of spent down their existing allocation amounts. Lizzie, Mark, does that sound right? Okay.
I guess, yes, it is right. I would say a few things. MassWorks is an immensely popular program. Municipalities love applying for it. They love getting it, and governors love giving out the money. So I would not be surprised that there may be a desire to increase MassWorks funding. We should remember MassWorks is the consolidation of 7 state programs. And it's been a little awkward in some ways, in my opinion, but MassWorks itself has now been folded into One Stop. And I don't really think it's likely that too many programs are going to now be folded into MassWorks. It could happen, but I think it's more likely that we will see, gradually an increase in MassWorks funding. It's really a separate question whether or not the administration will try to condition funding from various other pots on 3A compliance. The Baker administration certainly, I don't use this word pejoratively, but I think it's an accurate word, threatened to do so. And I believe the statute can be interpreted in such a way that they have the ability to do so. But whether or not the Healy administration will say, here are 8 other programs not mentioned in the statute that are also going to be conditioned on 3A compliance, I think is an open question. I don't think we have any indication of that at this point in time. I think to some degree they will be looking for the level of compliance to determine whether or not any further sticks are needed.
Thank you, Mark. All right, seeing no other questions, Leah, anything further to report?
No, not at this time. I think, we're waiting to see sort of what the reshuffle looks like in terms of where all of the bills will get sent to in terms of their committee. So we'll be soon, I think by the next meeting, providing some more information about where the bills are all sent to keep you guys apprised of where all the priorities are. So we're sort of waiting for that information to come down. And thank you, Matt, for jumping in the chat with some more details about that MassWorks authorization. If there are any questions, as always, you know where to find me.
Thank you, Leah. Appreciate it. All right, so why don't we move to number 6, which is preparation for the Winter Council meeting on March 2nd. And we've got about 15 minutes still with a project update to come. So, Mark, are you taking this?
I'm aiming for 3 minutes, Adam.
Okay, do it.
Monica Tibbetts-Nutt, who most of you know and is a former vice president of this organization, now under secretary at MassDOT, is going to be speaking. Lizzie and I were talking just yesterday about Monica's agenda, and I think it's going to be a very interesting speech, and she'll have a lot of interesting things to say. So we're very excited about that. We have 3 recommended changes in bylaws. I'm going to summarize them very quickly. And Lizzie will help me if I forget any, Lizzie or Catherine, because I don't have them up in front of me. One is to change the quorum requirement so we do not count in the denominator vacant seats. This helps us just a tiny bit to reach a quorum, which, to be perfectly honest, we're always worried about in the virtual meetings, but we're a little panicked about in the annual meeting, which is going to be in person. And so we are hoping that you will accept that change. The other change is to allow for future changes in the bylaws to be approved by a simple majority rather than 2/3. If municipalities can do that with housing zoning, why not with a change in the MAPC bylaws? And the third change, which really just occurred to us during the slightly odd situation that occurred last month, was, I have the authority to fill vacancies in the positions of officers with the assent of the executive committee until the next council meeting. You gave me that authority. I used it to appoint Jennifer to be vice president and Imai to be secretary, and they will be voted on at the council meeting. As the bylaws are currently written, it indicates that we have to do a whole nominating committee process in the interim, which, to be blunt, is ridiculous and would never fit into that period of time. So we're asking to scratch that requirement. And my hope is that you will do that. Lizzie has asked me to remind you that I think she did, even though the flood of emails and texts that I've been getting are almost all related to Hanscom now. But I think in there was one saying, or it's reminding you that in addition to voting on vice president and secretary, we will also be filling 1 vacant city seat and 1 vacant town seat. And we will be sending out nominating forms for that. No nominating committee, but nominating forms.
And the only thing I'll add there is just to remind folks that if you are interested in continuing in your officer role, you also have to nominate yourself for that as well. So that is directed to our 2 most recently appointed officers who we're hoping will consider continuing in their role at this election. Thanks,
Thank you,
Imai.
Lizzie. Thank you, Lizzie.
That's exactly what I was looking for.
I'm going to
Um,
suggest that we have a vote on the bylaw amendments, not to adopt them, but to recommend their adoption to council. But I'm going to ask Adam if we could do that roll call after.
We
Eric
did that,
and his
Mark,
team.
at our last meeting that you were, we did that except for the very last one. We did that at our last meeting. The bylaw changes.
I think we did it at the officers meeting, Lizzie.
Did we? Oh, I thought we did it here. Sorry about that. My
No,
mistake.
that's okay. That's all right.
I recall the officers, but I can't recall the bylaw.
So I'm going to ask that we do that roll call, but if you could postpone it until after the transportation team makes their presentation, I would appreciate that.
Sounds good. Mo, then Aaron.
I would like to offer that motion because I think these changes make a lot of sense and are practical.
Thank you, Mo. Aaron? Where did I leave? Aaron, go ahead.
Oop, sorry. There's a motion on the floor, so I don't want to.
Yeah. Mo, could I ask you to withdraw your motion, and I'll ask you to make it again after we hear from on the project update?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I withdraw the motion.
Thank you, Mo. Aaron, go ahead.
Sorry. I just wanted to kind of clarify too. So at the winter council meeting, the seat for the city and the town, plus Jennifer and Imai's election is only until the annual council meeting. And then we will
Yes, it is.
all, not we all, whoever chooses to run again. So this is a great way. I know Kurt was selected this way, but this is a really good way to kind of dip your toe in to the delegate seat, because it's really only a 3-month appointment for election. And then it gives you an opportunity to run again.
If you can't stand it, you can leave, but
With the free lunch? No.
Tabor.
I guess I just want to make sure that I can make a comment on the amendment. Article 5, there was it just looks like a typo. Because it shall be by a majority of those the council members present, and it sounds like it needs the word of, which was crossed out.
I think that's a technical change, and we can make that change regardless of the vote, I think.
Okay, thanks.
Great.
We will check it.
All right, so we will come back to this motion. But Mark, would you like to introduce, I see Travis, or do we want to just turn it directly to Travis to give us an update on the—
Travis, are you doing this, or is Eric doing it?
I am. Catherine, I thought, was going to start things off.
Okay, Catherine.
Yeah, I can introduce. Yeah, Eric
Okay.
isn't able to join us today, but Travis is the one who had the major role of submitting and hitting send on this grant application. So that's anyone who's been into the federalgrants.gov knows that's no small feat. I just wanted to take a moment to say that this is the first of what we hope are several opportunities happening where MAPC is working with our cities and towns and partners in the region to bring federal resources into the region. As Travis will explain, this one we're really working with the Boston MPO. They were the lead on it, and MAPC as the fiduciary agent, we were the one that applied. But as Sam mentioned in his treasurer's report earlier, we've received additional resources from the state through DLTA augmentation funds to help our cities and towns apply for state and federal resources, in particular under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. We just received that agreement recently, and so we, along with the other RPAs who also receive these funds, are beginning to lean into that work. A lot of it focused on transportation and clean energy and climate resilience. So the Safe Streets for All grant, it is a new grant program that was created under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. So it's great that we already have that track record of bringing in these resources, even though that was even predated when we got these additional DLTA resources. Without saying any more, I'm going to turn it over to Travis.
Thank you, everyone. Travis Pollock, I'm a senior transportation planner here at MAPC. If I haven't met you already, good to be here. I will share my screen. Let me see if I can make sure I choose the correct screen to share. Try this. Sorry. I'm not doing a very good job of this. Sorry. Just give me 1 second.
Have we made you a co-host, Travis?
You have.
Okay.
You would think I would get this by
Yeah.
now, Mark, and I apologize for not getting this correct, but I'm going to try to do this here, and I'm going to.
Well, that must be the greater Boston region there with all those mountains.
There we go. Now I can't see anyone, so can you give me a verbal if you're seeing my screen?
We can see the slides.
Okay, thank you. So, as Catherine mentioned, this is the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant. This is a grant funding from the feds that will help support local initiatives to do away with deaths and serious injuries on our roadways, which is often referred to as Vision Zero or toward Vision Zero initiatives. And in the federal law, there was $5 billion appropriated nationwide, $1 billion per year for each fiscal year. This is the first fiscal year that this funding has been made available. And the program funds both action plans, which is what the Boston MPO and MAPC were awarded for, as well as implementation projects, which is what the city of Boston and Springfield, for example, were awarded to do construction on roadways and intersections to make safety improvements for those areas. So the award that was received for the Boston MPO and MAPC was a little over $2 million for about a $2.7 million plan for creating what we call a regional safety action plan. And the Boston MPO, as was mentioned, they'll be the lead. We are the grant recipient, and our staff here will also assist. The process will have an 18-month process, creating a task force and hiring a consultant. The idea is to adopt the plan with the safety goals and timelines that will have strategies of not only projects, but also policies and programs. This will then make the region and our municipalities in the MPO region eligible for implementation funds, which ultimately will lead to safer streets and more equitable streets in our region. I want to point out that this program, I should say, is consistent with both the MPO's goals for safety and equity, as well as our recently adopted Metro Common, to have not only a safer region, safer for all, but also to, as was mentioned, work together regionally to have the funding and work together when we have so much of this is really a regional issue. We have corridors and intersections that really cross municipal lines. And so having a regional plan, we think is very critical for this program. So this is a map of fatal crashes from motor vehicle crashes from 2016 to 2020. This is what part of the data that was required for us when we applied with the MPO for the program. And so what I want to point out here is there was about 546 fatalities between 2016 and 2020 in our region. I believe about 30% of those or so were pedestrian, about 5% pedestrian, the rest were motor vehicles. And this is about 109 fatalities per year on average. Since 2020, we've had continued upswing in the number of crashes and fatalities, which is, so we're trending in the wrong direction, in other words. And you can see here that this is something that not only in the core, but also other areas. And equity is really a big important part of this in terms of what we do and what will be done on the plan. So as you can see, we mapped the historically disadvantaged communities. And what we do know from data nationally, we don't have so much data from Massachusetts, but nationally is that African Americans and Native Americans are more likely to die if they are struck as pedestrians, and also people the crashes that happen in lower income areas people are more likely to die than in other areas. So this really is a disproportionate impact on many in our community. In terms of what the program will be, this is what the federal government requires be in our plan, and this helps. This is what created some of our scope of work. So importantly is not only the leadership commitment from the MPO, but also the goal setting. So if we get to Vision Zero or to zero deaths and serious injuries, what are our benchmarks along the way? Really important is the collaboration and equity considerations, both in terms of the outreach and in terms of the policies that we have. And then the plan is to have ultimately an adopted plan that not only has policy changes, but project prioritization, and not only project prioritization regionally, but also make sure that the plan has project or types of projects that are prioritized that would allow municipalities to then apply for additional federal funds to implement those changes and continually make our streets safer for all. Our next steps are to execute the grant with the DOT. We have gotten an email from the FHWA stating who our contact is and that how we will do that, and then to finalize the work that will be done led by the MPO in terms of hiring a consultant and what MAPC's role is, and to establish that task force. And I just want to say that we're really excited for this. This is something that we think is really important for our region. As I mentioned, we're seeing too many crashes, too many fatalities, too many serious injuries on our roadways. And we really hope that this can go a long way to creating a safer and equitable region for on our streets. And with that, I'll stop and I will take any questions.
Thank you, Travis. And thank you, Catherine, for your work leading the team in this scoring this grant. It's really great work. Questions for Travis? We've probably got time for one or two questions. Colette.
So in some of the presentations I had seen on this program earlier, it seems like in this next step, now that they've been successful with the grant, there might need to be some sort of steering committees for different types of communities, because the risks that are faced in rural versus suburban versus urban communities are different. Is that part of this next step?
Yes, we talked about this, I say we, with the MPO when we were talking about just setting up our scope of work and our task force. So this has not been finalized, but we do agree that with such a large region, we will need to think about different strategies and different challenges in different communities, whether they're more rural, more suburban, or urban. And so having a task force that has all those representations and thinking about programs and policies and projects that meet all those needs is something that we want to do in this comprehensive action plan.
Thank you, Travis. Any other questions? All right, seeing none. Thank you. Congratulations on the good work.
Thank you.
All right, so we're at 1 o'clock and we have two motions that I think we should do separate. Mo, could I ask you to once again make your motion to approve the bylaw, to recommend to the council the approval of the bylaw changes as presented by Mark?
Sorry, I move that we recommend to the council meeting the bylaw changes as outlined in the materials presented today.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mo. Seconded by John DePriest. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Imai, I think we've lost Imai. Sharonda, Colette.
Aye.
Kurt.
Aye.
Adam, I vote aye. Jen.
Aye.
Tom.
Aye.
John DePriest.
Aye.
Mo.
Aye.
Diego, I think we lost Diego. Tabor.
Aye.
Gina.
Aye.
Steve Olenoff.
Aye.
Sam.
Aye.
We lost Steve Silvera and Aaron.
Aye.
Great. Motion carries. Thank you. And now, is there any other business before I entertain a motion to adjourn, Mark?
Nope.
Okay. Great. So if someone would like to make a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
All right. Made by Aaron, seconded by John. Colette.
Aye.
Kurt.
Yeah, aye.
Adam, I vote aye. Jen.
Aye.
Tom.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Mo.
Aye.
Tabor.
Yes.
Gina.
Aye.
Steve Olenoff.
Aye.
Sam.
Aye.
And Elaine. All right. Aaron, sorry, wrong E at the end. Sorry.
Aye.
I didn't mean to take your final vote away from you, Aaron. All right. Thank you, everybody. This meeting is adjourned. We'll see you at the council meeting.
Happy